The wind howled against the cliffs like a warning no one dared to heed. Perched on the edge of the California coastline, Vigilance Point loomed over the Pacific like a fortress from another world. Steel, glass, and code woven into the bones of its design. Its walls were smooth, reflective, cold to the touch, and utterly unforgiving. The mansion's windows stretched from floor to ceiling, letting in the endless sky. But no one ever looked out. Not really. Cameras did that now. Cameras and algorithms. Drones buzzed above the trees like silent sentinels, and motion sensors pulsed beneath the marble floors, detecting the slightest shift in air pressure or heat. Inside, Adrian Blackmoor stood before a black glass console glowing with light, his gray eyes flicking from screen to screen with surgical precision. 36 years old, worth $9.3 billion, founder of Sentinel Systems, America's most feared digital security empire. And entirely, completely alone. His jaw was sharp, his frame lean and honed like a man who lived on discipline and cold showers. The cuff of his custom black dress shirt peeked from beneath the sleeve of a soft charcoal sweater, pressed so perfectly it looked like it had been ironed on his skin. His dark hair was immaculately combed back, a single silver strand betraying the stress even his machines couldn't erase. He didn't trust people, not since Marcus Trellin. 5 years ago, Adrian had built his first biometric firewall in a warehouse in East Oakland. 2 years later, Trellin, his childhood friend, co-founder, and only real lice-old proprietary code to a rival firm. It had cost Adrian everything: contracts, investors, the public's faith. But it had earned him one thing he now considered priceless: paranoia. He had rebuilt from ash and betrayal. And Vigilance Point was the crown atop his barbed wire kingdom. The mansion wasn't just his home. It was a weapon, an extension of his will. No one entered without leaving digital footprints. No one walked its halls unseen. Privacy here wasn't preserved, it was observed, cataloged, archived, for safety. He told himself, for order, for control. That morning, as the ocean crashed against the rocks hundreds of feet below, a new set of eyes crossed the estate's threshold. Eva Marlowe stepped out of the staff van with a canvas bag slung over one shoulder and her hair pulled into a no-nonsense ponytail. Her uniform was plain gray collared shirt, black slacks, but she walked with the kind of quiet strength that made people pause. She wasn't there to impress anyone, just to work, just to earn enough to cover her brother Liam's next round of treatments. The cleaning job came from an elite agency she'd only dared to apply to after her third eviction notice, and somehow, miraculously, they'd called back. She didn't know why a tech billionaire needed for housekeepers for a mansion he never entertained in. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. At 24, Eva had already learned how to keep her head down, her record clean, and her dignity intact. Life hadn't given her many options since the fire that took her parents, and Liam's condition made dreams feel like distant luxuries. But her eyes, they still held something soft, not naive, just undimmed. A warmth she carried like a secret she refused to surrender. Mrs. Helena Delacroix, head of staff and as crisp as the starch in her collar, met Eva at the east entrance. "You're assigned to the greenhouse, lower library, and west gallery," she said briskly, handing over a clipboard. "Mr. Blackmoor prefers silence. No lingering. No personal items in guest zones. You'll find replacement uniforms in the lower east quarters. Lunch is at 12 sharp, understood?" "Yes, Mum," Eva said with a polite nod. Mrs. Delacroix's eyes narrowed. There was something different about this girl. Not in her appearance, though. Eva's natural beauty was impossible to ignore, but in the way she didn't flinch at the mansion's grandeur or its rules. Most new hires shrank in Vigilance Point's presence. Eva seemed unshaken. As she entered the hall, a dozen hidden lenses rotated toward her. She didn't see them, but someone else did. High above, Adrian watched the feed briefly from the main entry camera. Just another housekeeper, he told himself, just another human variable to contain. But something about her gait, confident but unassuming, caught his eye longer than it should have. And for the first time in weeks, he didn't switch to the next screen. The greenhouse sat like a crystal dome on the southern edge of Vigilance Point, breathtaking, humid, alive in a way the rest of the mansion wasn't. Rows of tropical plants stretched toward the arched glass ceiling, their colors defiant in the face of surveillance and silence. No guests ever entered this space. It was, according to Mrs. Delacroix, a legacy installation, but Adrian had refused to let anyone dismantle it. No one knew why. The rest of the house was cold code and minimalism, but the greenhouse throbbed with unruly green life. That morning, Eva moved through the paths between orchids and palms, pushing a stainless steel cart stocked with cleaners and cloths. She was careful, meticulous. She'd only been at Vigilance Point 3 days, but she already knew the rhythm of its emptiness, that it was like working inside a living computer. Every sound felt amplified: the squeak of her shoes on the marble, the distant whir of automated air filters. She rarely saw another person. Sometimes a gardener passed through. Once, she caught a glimpse of Adrian Blackmoor on the third-floor balcony, speaking into a headset, pacing like a general in a digital war. But mostly, the house was silence and instruction. Today felt heavier than usual. She couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the heat in the greenhouse or the way the mist clung to the glass walls, like watching eyes. Maybe it was the email from Liam's doctor that morning. Insurance denied again. We'll need to refile for emergency assistance. Eva had folded the message and slipped it into her bag. She couldn't afford to cry. Not here. Not now. She reached the back of the greenhouse where tall jungle vines climbed toward the steel rafters. There, on a forgotten shelf behind a sprawling monstera, was a stubborn patch of dark mold clinging to the wall. It had probably been there for weeks. She sprayed it with industrial cleaner, the scent sharp and sterile, and reached to scrub. That's when it happened. The bottle slipped. She'd been balancing on the edge of a low step stool, trying to reach high behind a row of hanging ferns. The weight shifted. Her foot missed. She caught herself barely, but the bottle flipped, arsing a fine mist of cleaner across her front. It soaked her uniform, sharp against her skin. She gasped and stepped down quickly, already pulling at the collar. The cleaner had seeped through to her undershirt and beneath. It stung badly. Damn it, she muttered under her breath, checking the label. Contains mild corrosives. Rinse skin immediately. Eva looked around. The greenhouse was empty, silent. The nearest staff restroom was in the lower corridor, 2 floors down, and she didn't think she could make it without the burning getting worse. Her locker was even farther. She hesitated, then remembered. She had a spare uniform folded inside a zip bag in her cart. She'd brought it just in case. She always did. She never assumed anything good would last. Pulling the cart to the far end of the greenhouse, she moved behind the tall vertical planters where the visibility was low and the vines cast thick, leafy shadows. There was no obvious camera in sight, no blinking lights, no hum, no mirrors. She moved quickly. Her fingers shook slightly as she unbuttoned the soaked shirt. Her undershirt was already mottled with pink where the chemical had irritated her skin. She peeled it off and grabbed the soft replacement from the plastic bag. She wasn't trying to be discreet. She was trying to be fast. She didn't see the small black eye of the camera nestled in the upper corner of the greenhouse, structure tucked into the latticework near the irrigation pipes. A camera meant to prevent rare botanical theft. A camera she hadn't been told existed. And for stories above, in the surveillance room he usually kept dark. Adrian Blackmoor was scrolling. He wasn't looking for her. Not really. He was doing his daily perimeter check, an ingrained ritual of control. The footage from overnight had shown a spike in motion near the outer wall. A raccoon, probably. Still, he always reviewed every feed. His screen flicked through rooms one by one: garage, corridor, gallery, greenhouse. And then he froze. There, on screen, half shielded by foliage, was Eva, her back turned slightly, her shirt hanging from her fingers, her skin exposed as she reached for clean clothes. Not staged, not suggestive, simply caught mid-movement. Caught because she had nowhere else to go. Adrian's jaw clenched. He didn't move. For half a breath, he simply stared, his mind blank, his throat dry. The feed continued. A button closed, a sleeve pulled up, her ponytail tightened. She never looked around, never realized. And in that moment, Adrian realized something with blinding clarity. He had violated her trust without ever meaning to. He clicked off the feed. He didn't just stop watching, he stood, his heart hammering in his chest, his breath tight. He had designed Vigilance Point to be impregnable, not just to threats but to vulnerability. But now he felt like the threat. He went to the command panel and issued a rare override. The greenhouse system backup drives included was flagged for purge, not partial, complete. No. Footage would remain, not on disk, not in cloud, not in shadow. As the deletion began, Adrian stood motionless in the dark room, one hand braced on the edge of the console. He wasn't sure why, but his chest ached. It wasn't desire. It wasn't guilt. It was something he hadn't felt in years. Responsibility. Respect. And something far more dangerous. Curiosity. The deletion process should have taken 12 seconds. Adrian stood before the main console, watching as digital frames vanished from the timeline like chalk wiped from a board. But his mind was still stuck in the greenhouse. Caught between the spray of cleaner and the look on Eva's face, or rather, the absence of it. The way she hadn't looked around, hadn't even considered the possibility of being watched. That haunted him, not because of what he saw, but because of what she believed, that there were still places in this world where a person could be alone. He had built a life on erasing those places. A soft chime pinged from the terminal. Purge complete. Adrian exhaled. It wasn't relief. It was a reckoning. He reached up and unplugged the greenhouse camera from the master network, something no one had done since the system was installed. A red warning blinked on screen. Perimeter integrity compromised. He dismissed it. There would be no footage, no shadow copies, no evidence. No eyes but his had seen. But it didn't feel clean. It felt like a sin he hadn't committed, but still had to answer for. Downstairs, unaware of what had just been erased from existence, Eva returned to her duties. Her skin still tingled where the cleaner had burned, but she was dry, clothed, and moving her shield of professionalism back in place. She was scrubbing baseboards in the west corridor when Mrs. Delacroix appeared at her side, like a ghost in pressed heels. "You're needed in the office." Now, Eva blinked, straightening. "Is something wrong?" "Mr. Blackmoor has requested a meeting, personally." The words struck like a bell in her chest. She'd only seen the man in passing. Dark clothes, darker eyes, always gliding through the estate like smoke. "Requested, personally?" Eva followed the head of staff through the echoing marble halls, her nerves tightening with each step. Her mind raced. Had she broken a rule? Was the uniform change somehow caught? Had someone complained? No one was even in the greenhouse, right? They arrived outside a steel-reinforced door. No plaque, no handle, just a biometric scanner. Mrs. Delacroix pressed her hand to the glass panel. The door whispered open. "He'll see you now. Stand when he enters. Do not speak unless spoken to." Then the woman disappeared down the hall, her heels clicking like gunshots. Eva stepped into the room. It was unlike any office she'd seen. Dark, sleek, humming with the quiet power of surveillance. Giant screens glowed along one wall, filled with lines of code, heat maps, rotating feeds from unseen places. No windows, just light from machines. The air smelled like metal and ozone. She stood alone until the elevator door at the back of the room opened, and Adrian Blackmoor emerged. He didn't walk like other men. He moved with the kind of economy that came from habitually carrying dangerous truths. Tall, lean, dressed in matte black, he looked like a man carved from precision. His eyes scanned her with a calm that felt like a searchlight. Eva stiffened. "Miss Marlowe," he said. His voice was deeper than she expected, smooth but threaded with something hard to place. "Thank you for coming." Of course, sir." He motioned to a chair across from a brushed steel desk. "Please, sit." She did, folding her hands in her lap, every muscle alert. Adrian didn't sit. He walked slowly to the desk, tapped a button, and the screens behind him powered down one by one until the room was dim, quiet, almost intimate. "I need to speak with you about something that occurred this morning," he said. Eva felt the breath catch in her throat. There was an incident in the greenhouse. She said nothing. Her stomach dropped. Adrian paused. He didn't look away. "You spilled a cleaning solution. It soaked through your clothes. You believed you were alone. Eva's eyes widened, her lips parted. "The camera," she whispered, horror blooming in her chest. "Yes," he said simply, her face flushed. She stood without thinking, blood rushing to her ears. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. I thought it was private. I wasn't trying to." Adrian raised a hand gently. "You did nothing wrong," he said. "Nothing inappropriate. Nothing disrespectful. The fault is entirely mine." Eva froze. "I designed this system," he continued, "to detect threats, breaches, vulnerabilities I never accounted for. A situation like this, a person in need, a human moment." He exhaled. "I saw the footage. Only for a moment. Then I deleted it. Personally, completely." Eva sat slowly. Her hands trembled. "You have my word," he said, and for once in his life, it felt like a vow. "It will never be seen again. Not by anyone." She looked at him, not just his words, but his face. The tension in his jaw, the shadow in his eyes. He was telling the truth, and something else. He was ashamed of his own empire, of the thing he had built to protect, but which had instead intruded. "Thank you," she whispered, voice barely audible. Adrian stood there, silent, watching her, and in that stillness, something shifted. For the first time, the man who knew everything, who watched, tracked, and calculated every variable, was confronted with a person who was not a variable. She was not data. She was not noise. She was real, and she had trusted him. Adrian Blackmoor, billionaire and watcher of the world, felt something strange stir in his chest, a feeling he didn't have code for, something very close to reverence. The silence between them stretched like tension wire. Adrian didn't move. Neither did Eva. He had expected her to break eye contact, to shrink into the discomfort, to ask for reassignment or storm out of his office altogether. But she did none of those things. She sat there, spine straight, eyes wide but not afraid. "I've worked in a dozen homes," Eva said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her fingers. "But I never thought I'd be watched while changing my clothes." Adrian's expression didn't flinch, but something cracked inside him. There were worse things than betrayal, worse than theft or sabotage. There was shame, the kind you felt when someone else suffered because of the fortress you'd built. "I understand if you'd like to leave," he said quietly. "No questions asked, no penalty. Your remaining pay will be doubled, and I'll personally make a call to ensure you get placement elsewhere." Eva looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head. "I'm not quitting," she said simply. That caught him off guard. "You're not? You told me the truth," she said. "That's more than most employers would do. You deleted it. You didn't try to blame me or make excuses. That matters." Adrian blinked. The words hit harder than they should have. In his world, mistakes were eradicated, not forgiven. He wasn't prepared for the idea of grace. "I've got a brother," Eva continued, her voice softening. "He's 15. Medical bills keep stacking up. This job's the best opportunity I've had in 3 years. I won't let one awful moment take that from me." He admired that. He feared it, too. "You're stronger than most people I know," Adrian said, almost to himself. Eva gave a small smile. "I've had practice," he nodded, then stepped away from the desk and turned toward the wall of darkened monitors. A part of him wanted to say more but didn't know how. Eva stood, took one last look at the man who had built a kingdom of shadows, and quietly left the room. And Adrian? Adrian stared at the blank screens, realizing he missed the sound of her voice the second the door closed. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in the master suite staring at the ceiling's shifting skylight, tracking stars with algorithms that used to bring him peace. Not anymore. Instead, his mind returned again and again to her words. "You told me the truth. That matters." He thought of her standing in that greenhouse, soaked, frightened, vulnerable, and still somehow poised. The cameras hadn't captured her strength, but he had seen it. He opened a secure terminal beside the bed. With a few keystrokes, he accessed the employee files and added a new line to Eva's record: protected. No reassignment or termination without personal approval. Then he opened a subfolder few people in his company even knew existed: Blackmoor. Protocols, internal systems philosophy. He began typing a note to himself. The system must serve human dignity, not dominate it. Code without ethics is surveillance. With ethics, it becomes stewardship. He stopped, surprised at himself. Had she changed him already? Over the next several days, Adrian found himself drifting. He passed through corridors he never visited, loitered near the West Gallery at odd hours, and took lunch, something he hadn't done publicly in years, in the sunlit courtyard overlooking the citrus groves, not because he needed the air, but because Eva sometimes passed through that courtyard. Always efficient, always graceful, and when she saw him, she nodded politely, not like a servant, like a woman who had looked into the eyes of a billionaire and seen a man, and chosen not to flinch. On the 5th day, Adrian made a decision, one that surprised even himself. He called Thomas, the estate curator. Is the upper library cataloged? Not recently, Thomas replied. Too much foot traffic. We focused on lower levels. I want it restored. And I want Eva Marlowe to assist. A pause. She's cleaning staff, sir. She has. An eye for detail, Adrian said. And she's earned my trust. He ended the call. Eva was stunned when the assignment came down. No explanation. Just a new task. Assist with cataloging artwork and rare volumes in the upper library, an area previously forbidden to service staff. She climbed the grand staircase with cautious steps, notebook in hand, gloves tucked into her waistband. The double doors creaked open to reveal a room of deep walnut shelves, velvet armchairs, and skylights that bathed old books in filtered gold. And there he was, Adrian Blackmoor, seated on the leather bench by the far window, dressed in a crisp white shirt, jacket removed, cufflinks undone. Good morning, he said, rising as she entered. You called for me. I'd like your help, he said simply. There's a collection of rare prints on the far wall. They need documenting. You have a steady hand and an artistic eye. She hesitated. How would you know that? I watch, he said, then added, only in ways that respect you. Eva nodded slowly and moved toward the cabinet of prints. As she began inspecting the pieces, sketches of architecture, early blueprints of European cathedrals, Adrian didn't sit. He watched her, not like a collector with a prize, but like a man realizing something had slipped through his perfectly programmed world. Something real. Something uninvited. And absolutely unreplaceable. In the days that followed, their conversations bloomed quietly. First about the art, then about books, then about memory, trust, regret. And for the first time in years, Adrian laughed. Once. Softly. Just once. And it scared him more than any security breach he'd ever faced, because laughter, like love, was something no algorithm could predict. Rain rolled down the glass walls of Vigilance Point like melting steel. Outside, the cliffs disappeared into fog, and the Pacific roared in the distance like a creature in pain. But inside the mansion, the air was still almost reverent. In the upper library, Adrian Blackmoor stood before a shelf of rare volumes, his fingers tracing the spines like memories. He wasn't reading. He wasn't thinking about quarterly earnings or supply chain forecasts or code architecture. He was waiting. And that scared him more than he could admit. Downstairs, Eva Marlowe tightened the last knot on her bun and glanced at the clock. She had 15 minutes before her next assignment. 15 minutes until she walked back into the room where she no longer felt like a cleaner, but something less definable, something both heavier and lighter. They hadn't spoken of that moment again, the incident, but everything that followed it had been shaped by its gravity, as if that single accidental glimpse into her private world had pulled Adrian Blackmoor, surveillance tycoon, master of control, into orbit around something human again. And now she wasn't sure what to call what was growing between them. She only knew it felt dangerous, because if it was real, it could destroy them both. She entered the library just after 10. The room smelled faintly of old parchment and lavender polish. Adrian stood by the reading table, reviewing a catalog of rare sketches from Italian architects. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just his eyes, gray, steady, unreadable. Good morning, Miss Marlowe, he said. Her smile was faint but warm. Eva, she corrected gently. We've cataloged 500 prints together. I think we can drop the formalities. He inclined his head. Eva, then, They worked in silence for the next hour. The rain intensified outside, muffling the world into a cocoon of private stillness. She noticed things about him: the way his jaw tensed when he focused, the precise movements of his hands, the almost imperceptible way he leaned closer when she spoke. And he noticed everything about her: the careful grace with which she turned each page, the way her lips pressed together when she was deep in thought, the shadow of sadness that sometimes passed through her expression when she believed no one was looking. Finally, she spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, this room," she said, looking up at the skylight. "There are no cameras here." His gaze sharpened, but he didn't flinch. "That's correct." "Why?" He paused, then answered with surprising honesty. "It was my mother's request," he said. "Before she died, she believed there should be one place in the house that belonged only to memory. No recordings, no evidence, just presence." Eva nodded slowly. "She sounds like a wise woman." "She was." He paused. "She died before I built most of this place. But I honored that one request." There was a beat of silence. "You trust me in here," Eva said. More statement than question. "I do," he said. "And not because there's no camera, but because I've seen who you are." She swallowed hard. Her voice, when it came, was barely audible. "Sometimes I wish you hadn't." He turned to face her fully. "Why?" "Because I don't know what to do with the way you look at me now," she said. "Like I'm not just a girl who scrubs your floors." "You're not. You're my employer," she whispered. "And I'm an employee with a sick brother and no backup plan. People like me don't get involved with people like you." Adrian stepped closer, carefully. "I'm not asking for involvement," he said quietly. "I'm asking for honesty between us, because I haven't felt alive like this in years. Not since Marcus sold me out. Not since I stopped letting anyone in." Eva looked up at him, her breath shallow. "And what if someone finds out?" she asked. "What if the other staff start talking? You think it'll stop at whispers?" "I don't care what they say." "Well, I do," she snapped, more sharply than intended. "Because when they talk, they won't point at you, Adrian. They'll point at me. They'll say I seduced the man upstairs, that I used my body, that I knew the cameras were there, and I did it on purpose." Her voice cracked. Adrian's jaw tensed, fury rising in his chest, not at her but at the world, at the rules, at the narrative that would always target the woman, never the man. "Then let me do something," he said. Eva blinked. "What?" "I want to give you a different job," he said. "One that doesn't place you under anyone's thumb. I'm creating a new division for philanthropic partnerships, community grants, art programs, education. You'll help lead it. You'll be safe there, respected." Her eyes widened. "You do that just to protect me?" He looked at her. "No," he said. "I do that because you're brilliant, because you have ideas I don't, because you care about people in a way I forgot how to. I want to build something with you, not for you. And if protecting you is part of that, then yes, I'll do it." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because when I watched that footage," he said, voice low and raw, "I thought I was seeing vulnerability. But what I actually saw was strength." She didn't move. Neither did he. The room, with no cameras, felt like it was holding its breath. "I can't promise anything," she whispered. "I'm not asking you to," Adrian said. "I'm only asking that when you walk out of this room, you remember one thing." "What?" "That here, just here, there are no eyes but mine." She stepped closer, slowly, and for the first time, she reached out and touched his hand. He didn't move. He just closed his eyes. And for a man who had once built a life on surveillance, Adrian Blackmoor felt what it meant to finally be seen. The next morning, the mansion felt different. It wasn't the architecture still silent. It wasn't the view still vast, oceanic, unreachable. It was something else, something invisible, but undeniably there. A rumor. It spread not in voices, but in glances. It lingered in hallways and back corridors like a scent. It curled under doors, past security gates and high-speed routers. Whispers, questions, suspicion. It started, as these things often did, with a broken pattern. Someone noticed Adrian Blackmoor spent more time in the upper library than in his command center. Someone else saw Eva Marlowe walking out of that very room. A soft flush on her cheeks, and a guarded look in her eyes. Then someone Diana Vale, to be precise, noticed the camera logs. Diana wasn't just another member of the staff. She was head of Blackmoor Global's public relations division, recently relocated to Vigilance Point to streamline internal strategy. She was sharp, driven, with a smile that never reached her eyes. For months, she'd quietly harbored hopes of becoming more than a trusted executive to Adrian, not out of love, but out of calculation. She had staked her entire social capital on proximity to power. And now some girl from a cleaning agency whose resume didn't even fit on Blackmoor's letterhead was slipping past the glass walls. Diana watched. She listened, as she waited. Then, late one night, she accessed the satellite archives. Most of the estate's recordings were deleted or cycled within 72 hours, but a few flagged by anomaly detection software were automatically backed up for external forensic review. Redundancy was a core principle of Adrian's system, and there it was. A flag from 5 days ago. Motion anomaly. Greenhouse sector. Human exposure detected. Diana clicked, and what she saw made her lips curl into a blade-sharp smile. The video was only 42 seconds long. It showed Eva alone, hurried, changing in a corner where she thought no one could see. It wasn't graphic, it wasn't provocative, but it didn't need to be in the hands of the wrong person. It was poison. Diana copied the file to a secure drive. Then she made a second copy, one for insurance. She didn't send it immediately. No, she was more surgical than that. Instead, she began planting seeds, subtle comments to kitchen staff. Isn't it strange how Mr. Blackmoor's been spending so much time with the help? Or to the household scheduler, make sure Eva isn't scheduled for too many hours. In the upper library, we wouldn't want any misunderstandings. It didn't take much. The house, already a pressure chamber of silence and hierarchy, amplified the tension. And Eva felt it. She didn't know where it began, only that the air had changed. The way people looked at her, the sudden pauses in conversation, the way Mrs. Delacroix grew stiff and cool, even as Eva doubled down on professionalism. She'd done nothing wrong, but guilt clung to her anyway. Was it the library? Was it Adrian? Was it something she had missed entirely? Even Liam noticed her voice sounded tired when she called that night. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," she lied. "Just a long day." He didn't push. He knew her long days better than anyone. Meanwhile, Adrian sat in his personal study, dim lighting, just playing low from the built-in speakers, staring at his system logs. He had noticed the change too. Something was off. Too many overlapping queries on internal staff logs. Too much chatter between departments. And the most telling sign, Diana's access to the satellite archive at 2:43 a.m. He flagged the entry, set a trace. Then he sat back and waited. At 8:17 the next morning, Diana entered his office unannounced. Her heels clicked like accusations. "I need to speak to you about Eva Marlowe," she said. Adrian didn't look up from his desk. "I'm listening." "There's been talk," Diana said carefully, "about your proximity to her, about the amount of time she spends in restricted wings. I thought it was just gossip, until I reviewed the anomaly flag from the greenhouse camera." She slid a USB across his desk. Adrian's eyes didn't move. "I believe the footage could create complications. For you, for the company, and frankly, for her." Silence. Then Adrian lifted his gaze. His face was unreadable. What are you suggesting, Diana? That we address this quietly? Eva should be reassigned to another property. Out of the spotlight. Out of harm's way. Harm? Adrian echoed. "You mean your way?" Diana blinked. "I think you've misunderstood." "No," Adrian interrupted, his voice calm but lethal. "I think you misunderstood something. This is my home, my system, my judgment. And you've weaponized a moment that was never meant for anyone's eyes. You accessed a file I personally deleted, and you did it not out of concern, but ambition." Diana's mask cracked for just a second. "I've already made a copy," she said. "I didn't want to use it. But if this continues, if the staff keeps talking, there will be consequences." Adrian stood. Not suddenly, not loudly, but the temperature in the room dropped. "Then let me be clear," he said. "If that file is ever seen by another person, I will bankrupt your career, not destroy it." That would be merciful. I'll make you irrelevant. Permanently. Diana opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Adrian walked past her, opened the office door, and gestured. You're dismissed. She left, and she knew, without a doubt, she had lost. That night, Eva sat alone in the greenhouse, the same corner where everything had begun. The rain had returned, tapping softly against the glass dome. She leaned her forehead against the cool metal of the telescope mount. The world had shifted beneath her again, and she didn't know if it would hold. Then she heard the footsteps. She turned, and Adrian was standing there in the rainlight, his shirt damp from walking through the courtyard, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were only for her. Eva, he said. She stood slowly, unsure. Am I being fired? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Adrian said. You're being fought for. And he stepped forward, reaching for her hand. The girl who once undressed on camera out of necessity, the man who once watched the world from behind glass, now stood face to face, with no screens, no lies, and no more whispers between them, only truth, and the storm it might bring. The moment Adrian reached for her hand, Eva froze, not from fear, but from everything else. He had always been composed, calculated, surgically precise with his words. But now, under the rain-specked dome of the greenhouse, there was no suit of armor around his voice, just truth, unfiltered, human. You're being fought for. He'd said dot, and it undid her, because no one had ever said that to her before. Not the scholarships that rejected her with generic letters, not the foster system that passed her and Liam along like forgotten boxes, not even the hospitals that called her balance overdue before checking her brother's pulse. Adrian Blackmoor, the man who'd built a kingdom out of code and caution, was standing in the one place she'd been most vulnerable. And instead of looking away, he was offering her something terrifying and beautiful, a place at his side, and the war it would bring. You don't know what that means, Eva whispered, her throat tightening. I do, he replied, his voice low. It means exposing myself to the same scrutiny I let consume everyone else. It means showing them that even a man like me isn't untouchable. She took a step back. It also means dragging me into a world where I'll be eaten alive. You won't be, Adrian said, because I'll stand in front of you as long as I'm breathing. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The rain picked up, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the glass in a rhythm that matched the tension between them. Eva turned, her arms folded tight across her chest, her back to him. They're already talking, she said. I hear it in the hallways. I feel it in the way they stop smiling when I walk into a room. Do you know what it feels like to wonder if someone's laughing behind their hand every time you pass? Yes, Adrian said simply. I've lived in boardrooms where every handshake held a hidden dagger, but I've never let it keep me from doing what I believed was right. She faced him again, tears brimming in her eyes. Then what's right, Adrian? Me leaving before this becomes a scandal, or staying and watching people destroy me? Neither, he said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a letter on thick, official stationery, her name printed on it in elegant typeface. She took it with trembling hands. What is this? Your new position, he said. Director of Ethical Technology and Community Outreach, Blackmoor Global. Eva blinked. You're offering me a corporate title? I'm offering you a voice, Adrian said. A seat at the table. Not as a favor, not as charity, but because you've shown more ethics in a moment of vulnerability than most CEOs do in their entire lives. Eva opened the envelope. Inside was a job description, a salary beyond anything she'd dreamed of, and a section at the bottom that read, reports to CEO, status, executive, security level, alpha. She looked up at him, disbelief softening into awe. I don't want it to be your weakness, she said. You're not, he replied. You're the one thing in my life that's made me stronger. Lightning cracked outside. The glass walls flickered with light. I can't make this easy, she said. People will say I seduced you, that I planned all of this. Then let them say it, Adrian said, stepping closer, voice fierce, because they'll also see what I do next. He pulled out his phone and, with a single swipe, opened a private social media channel reserved for investors and journalists. He tapped into the estate's announcement system usually used for tech launches and media briefings. And then he spoke into it. Effective immediately, he said. Eva Marlowe has been appointed Director of Ethical Technology and Outreach at Blackmoor Global. This position reflects her exceptional insight, resilience, and values. Her influence on this company's future will be undeniable. Any individual attempting to smear, diminish, or question her position will answer directly to me. That will be all. He ended the broadcast. Eva stared at him, stunned. You just made it real. I just made it right, Adrian said. No more shadows. Outside the glass, the storm churned like a living thing. Inside the greenhouse, silence bloomed. Then Eva exhaled long, trembling, full of something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Hope. She moved toward him slowly, and he waited, his gaze never leaving hers. When her hand slid into his, there was no need for speeches. The world had already heard the declaration. But what passed between them in that moment? Quiet, powerful, unspoken, wasn't for the world. It was for them. Across the estate, the announcement sent shockwaves. In the kitchen, the staff stared at their phones, mouths open. In the West Wing, Mrs. Delacroix watched the clip twice, her expression unreadable, then carefully put her phone away and resumed her inventory. And in her private suite, Diana Vale threw her wine glass at the wall, watching it shatter like the future she'd built on ambition. But none of that mattered now. In the room where it had all begun, under a ceiling of storm-lit glass, Adrian Blackmoor wrapped his arms around Eva Marlowe, not out of guilt or protection, but because she was his equal. And for the first time in years, the man who had designed a world of walls chose to stand in the open, even if the world came for them, even if everything burned. Because some fires aren't destruction, some are resurrection. Adrian Blackmoor's announcement sent tremors far beyond the walls of Vigilance Point. Within 20 minutes, screenshots of his broadcast began circulating through media groups, employee chats, and niche investor forums. By the next morning, the news had broken containment. The headlines weren't whispers anymore, they were weapons. Billionaire CEO names cleaning girl as executive. Promotion or scandal? Was she more than just the help? Surveillance footage rumored at center of romance. The fall of the fortress. Has Adrian Blackmoor finally lost control? Adrian read the headlines from his study, seated alone at his steel glass desk while the Pacific thundered against the cliffs below. He didn't flinch. He'd seen worse. He'd survived worse. But what chilled him now was not the press. It was the silence from Eva. She hadn't come to the greenhouse that morning. She hadn't responded to his messages. And for the first time since they met, her absence wasn't quiet professionalism. It was avoidance. And he knew why. Because no matter how bold he'd been in standing beside her, the world hadn't changed overnight. And she, fierce, resilient Eva, had just been flung into a fire she never asked for. He stood, grabbed his keys, and walked out the door, not as a CEO, but as a man who knew what it meant to lose something precious because he hadn't fought hard enough. Eva sat alone in her car, parked in a quiet lot just beyond the cliffs. The dashboard clock blinked 9:03 a.m., but time didn't matter anymore. Her phone was flooded. Texts from Liam, from former co-workers, even from reporters who somehow found her number. She hadn't asked for the spotlight. All she'd wanted was stability, a chance to do honest work, to pay Liam's medical bills, to keep her dignity. Now she was trending. The article that hurt the most wasn't even cruel. It was clinical. From janitor to executive, the rise of Eva Marlowe. They used her real name, her real past, her real pain, and suddenly, nothing about her felt like her own anymore. Her thoughts spiraled fast, messy, breathless. What if I lose the job? What if they fire me just to cool the press? What if Liam sees the footage? What if he thinks I let this happen? She gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles went white. And that's when the knock came. Soft, unthreatening. She turned, startled, and there he was. Adrian, standing in the rain, without a coat, hair damp, shirt clinging to his frame, as if he'd walked through the storm just to find her. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her. She rolled down the window slowly. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know. There are cameras everywhere, Adrian. Not here. She swallowed. Everyone's watching. He shook his head. They're watching me. You're just in the frame. That ends now. She looked away. Voice low. I didn't ask for any of this, I know, he said again. But I did. I made the call to speak your name in public. I did it to protect you, and I realize now that I also did it to stake a claim. And that wasn't fair. Eva blinked. Then why are you here? Because I need to show you something, he said. She hesitated. Now, Adrian's jaw tightened. If I wait, I might never have the courage again. They drove in silence. The only sound the quiet hum of the heater and the distant crash of the sea. Adrian guided her not back to the mansion, but to a smaller structure tucked just behind. The northern bluff. A bunker of sorts. Gray, reinforced, unremarkable from the outside. What is this? Eva asked. My original server vault, he said, unlocking it. Before the estate was built. This is where Blackmoor systems began. He flicked on the lights. Dozens of old drives lined the walls, dusty monitors. A whiteboard still stained with early code formulas. It felt like stepping into the past. I used to think power meant knowing everything, Adrian said. Seeing everything, controlling everything. He walked to a small workstation at the back and opened a glass case. Inside it was a single hard drive, labeled by hand, first failure, Trellin breach. This is the backup Marcus used when he betrayed me, Adrian said. He stole my source code from this drive, and when I found out, I built Vigilance Point like a fortress, like a prison. He turned to her, eyes soft but steady. You were the first person to show me that not every unknown is a threat. Eva didn't speak. She just watched him unfolding. Finally, Adrian reached into his coat and pulled out a small bundle, a matchbox. I've kept this drive as a reminder of what I lost, what I swore I'd never lose again. Then, without another word, he pulled the drive from the casing, set it on the concrete floor, and struck a match. Eva's breath caught. Adrian, what are you doing? He crouched and held the flame to the casing. Plastic hissed. Wires sparked. The smell of burning silicon filled the air. When it was done, he stood again. Smoke curled upward like the ghost of a former life. I can't change what I built, he said. Voice rough, but I can choose what I burn, and I'd rather burn the memory of control than ever let you think I saw you as leverage. He stepped closer. I don't want you to be mine because I protected you. I want you to choose me freely, even if that means walking away. Eva stared at him, shaking. Then, finally, her voice broke free. You idiot, she whispered. Adrian's eyes widened, and then she kissed him, hard, fierce, honest. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was raw, like to people who had fought through fire, suspicion, and shame to find each other when they parted, breathless. Adrian held her face in his hands. So is that a yes? She nodded, laughing through tears. It's a maybe, but it's my maybe. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like he never wanted to let go. And for once, the surveillance king stood in a room with no cameras, no code, no safety net, just the wreckage of an old drive and the beginnings of something that finally felt like freedom. For 72 hours, Eva and Adrian disappeared from the world. No press, no estate staff, no PR spin or controlled messaging, just two people learning how to exist without armor between them. They spent the time in the northern cottage near the cliffs, where cell signals dropped and the wind drowned out the world. Adrian cooked for the first time in years, badly. Eva painted for the first time in forever. Quietly, they argued once over whether Liam should be relocated to a private clinic Adrian offered to fund, and then made up beneath a blanket of stars neither of them had time to name. Every moment, every shared look was still raw with risk, but it was real. And it was theirs. But storms don't stay outside forever. They have a way of finding their way through cracks, even the ones you thought you sealed. Back at Vigilance Point, Diana Vale wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Adrian's public threat had silenced her temporarily, but it hadn't erased the backup copy she'd saved to a ghost drive stored off-grid. The clip, the greenhouse, the moment that had started it all. She still had it. And now she had something else. A reporter willing to buy it. Not for publication. Not yet. But for leverage. The journalist's name was Marla Jex. A rising star with a dark reputation and a gleam in her eye that suggested she knew exactly how to use whispered truths like a scalpel. Diana handed her the drive in an empty hotel lounge overlooking the harbor. "You won't publish this," she said. "Not unless I say so." Marla raised an eyebrow. "Then why give it to me?" "Because I want insurance," Diana said. "If I go down, I take them down with me." Marla smiled. "That's what I like to hear." The deal was done in 10 minutes. No signatures, no fingerprints, just a glass of red wine and the birth of a slow-brewing disaster. Back at the estate, Adrian stepped into the central control room for the first time in days. The glow of the screens once a sanctuary now felt cold, foreign. He no longer needed the eyes in every hallway. He didn't need the algorithms, but he knew someone else might. He reviewed the system logs, and that's when he saw it. A data ping, not from within his estate's network, but from a clone IP. Someone had copied the greenhouse footage after he deleted it. He stared at the red warning box on the screen. One download, traced back to an unregistered external signal. Portable, sloppy, fast. Someone had made a copy. And it wasn't just a leak. It was a threat. Adrian called Eva immediately. She picked up, breathless. "Is something wrong?" "Yes," he said. "I need you back at the estate. Now." "Why?" "Because the footage still exists, and someone's moving it." Eva's breath caught. "But you said." "I know what I said," he interrupted. "And I meant it. I destroyed my copy. But someone else found a vulnerability before I closed the system, and now they're holding it." "For what?" "Power." The silence on the line was like a wire pulled tight. "I'll be there in 30. Eva said. 33 minutes later, she walked into the estate's security wing. Her hair damp from ocean mist, her jacket still half buttoned. Adrian stood beside the main console, jaw clenched, eyes stormy. He turned to face her. "I know who did it," he said. "And I know where it's going. The reporter is Marla Jex." "I know that name," Eva said. "She destroyed a senator's career over leaked medical records." "She's worse than that," Adrian said. "She deals in character assassination, dressed up as journalism, and she'll use the footage if she thinks it'll give her a story." Eva swallowed, then let her. Adrian blinked. "What?" "I said let her release it," Eva repeated, more clearly. "I'm done running. I'm done hiding." He took a step closer. "Eva, if this goes public, then it goes public," she said, voice trembling. With conviction. "They'll see a girl trying to do her job. Nothing sexual, nothing posed. Just me being human. And if they want to twist that into shame, then let them try. Because I won't be ashamed." Adrian's expression cracked, and for a moment, all his defense systems, his wealth, his code, his contingency plans meant nothing. Because Eva's strength was something he couldn't code, couldn't encrypt, could only stand beside. "I'll call a press conference," he said. "We'll face it together, not as a scandal, but as a reckoning." Eva nodded. But then, something unexpected happened. Thomas, the estate's longtime systems manager, appeared at the door, holding a hard drive. "I thought you might want to see this," he said, stepping forward. Adrian frowned. "What is it?" "It's not the clip," Thomas said. "It's the context, the full footage, from the greenhouse camera, start to finish, including everything that came before and after." Adrian inserted the drive. The footage played, and what they saw stunned them both. Because the clip the reporter had, the one Diana had stolen, was cut, edited, crafted to suggest that Eva had knowingly undressed in full view of a camera, and then lingered suggestively. The movements were slowed, framed, the angle cropped to remove the industrial cleaner bottle, the stain on her uniform, the pain in her face. But the real footage, it showed the accident, the urgency, the discomfort. It showed Eva scrambling to fix her uniform, clearly distressed, clearly unaware of any surveillance. It was not titillating. It was harrowing, and it was proof. Adrian turned to Eva. Her face was pale. "They were going to humiliate me," she whispered. "They still might try," Adrian said. "But now we'll show the truth. On our terms." The next morning, the world changed again. Adrian Blackmoor stood before the press. No suit, no podium, no prepared statement. Just a man with a screen. Behind him, and a truth the world needed to see. He played the unedited footage. Then he said one sentence. This is the moment the world tried to shame a woman for surviving her job with dignity, and this is the moment I say, not on my watch. The room went silent, the internet lit up, and Diana Vale's name began trending for all the wrong reasons. Eva watched it unfold from the upper library, tears in her eyes but her spine straight, not just because she had been protected, but because, finally, she had fought back, and won. The backlash came fast like a tidal wave that had been waiting just offshore. But this time, it didn't crash down on Eva. It crashed down on those who had tried to turn her into a spectacle. Diana Vale was suspended within 48 hours from all Blackmoor global activities. Her digital trail painstakingly reconstructed by Adrian's internal ethics team revealed not only the theft of classified footage, but the unauthorized creation of a false narrative meant to emotionally manipulate the public. She was offered one chance, a quiet exit with a signed admission of guilt, or a very loud legal reckoning that would bankrupt her soul first and her reputation second. She chose silence, but the world wasn't silent. Thousands of women, online housekeepers, assistants, students, nurses flooded the comments sections. With their stories, they spoke of changing rooms with no locks, of uniforms that clung to sweat, of accidental exposures turned into trauma, of shame forced upon them by others. Eva had unintentionally given them a banner, and they raised it high. Let her work began trending globally. Hashtag #DignitiNoTrama soon followed. And then came the most unexpected tag of all. Hashtag Adrian stood up because the man who had once built walls of steel and code had done what so many powerful men refused to do. He took responsibility. Publicly. Openly. Without conditions. A week later, Eva stood on a small stage in San Francisco. Under the soft lights of the Skyline Arts and Equity Forum, the room was packed. Journalists, tech leaders, activists, even politicians. But Eva didn't see them. She saw Liam in the front row, clapping like his life depended on it. She saw Adrian standing just behind the curtain, not hovering, not controlling, just being present, the way he always had when it mattered. Eva adjusted. The Mick took a breath and began, I never wanted to be known for a mistake, especially one I didn't make. A hush fell over the room. But what I've learned is that some moments, no matter how accidental, are actually invitations. Invitations to speak up, to stand taller, to change the way we look at dignity, privacy, and power. She glanced down at the crowd, then back up. I'm not here today because of a camera. I'm here because someone decided to see me as a person, not a headline. She paused, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. And now, I help others do the same. Behind her, the screen shifted. A new logo appeared, sleek, bold, full of movement. The Marlowe Initiative, a partnership with Blackmoor Global, empowering dignity in the digital age. The program would launch with $10 million in funding, dedicated to installing consent-first surveillance systems in workplaces around the country. Systems that prioritized employee privacy, offered real-time visibility reports, and required biometric approval to view sensitive footage. Technology, finally, built for the watched, not just the watchers. Eva stepped down to a standing ovation. Later, that evening, she stood with Adrian on the roof of the Blackmoor Tower, the city stretching around them in every direction. It was the first time in months that the world wasn't pressing in on her. The wind teased her hair. The lights blinked far below. Adrian handed her a glass of wine. You stunned them. She smiled. You gave me the stage. No, he said. You built it. I just followed your lead. They stood together in the dark, not needing to speak. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was full of everything they'd survived, everything they'd fought for, everything they refused to let break them. Eva turned to him. You could have hidden it all, you know. You could have buried the footage, protected your image, moved on. I almost did, Adrian said. But then I thought, what's the point of power if you use it to protect yourself instead of protect what's right? She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. I'm glad you didn't run. So am I. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Eva pulled back slightly. Her heart stuttered. Adrian, I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet, he said, smiling faintly. Not because I don't want to, but because I want you to decide everything for yourself. Your pace, your terms. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, not a diamond, not a jewel, but a silver band, engraved with a single phrase: seen, heard, chosen. Eva blinked, fighting tears. It's beautiful. It's yours, he said, whenever you're ready. Whether that's next year or never. She took it in trembling fingers, then looked at him. You built a fortress, she whispered, but you let me walk right in, and you didn't tear it down. Adrian replied, you lit it from the inside. 3 months later, the greenhouse room was rebuilt, this time, not as a surveillance point, but as a sanctuary. Employees gathered there for breaks, for quiet, for peace. The cameras had been removed permanently. In the corner stood a small plaque for Eva Marlowe, who reminded us that dignity begins where control ends. Adrian still ran Blackmoor Global. Eva still ran the Marlowe Initiative, and together, they walked forward, not as a scandal, not as a power couple, not as an internet moment, but as two imperfect people who had dared to trust each other when the world said don't. They made their life in the open, where nothing had to be hidden, and where the only thing left to watch was how far they'd rise.